This is Chasing the Horizon, a podcast by, for, and about motorcyclists, brought to you by Dunlop Motorcycle Tires and the BMW Motorcycle Owners of America. Welcome to episode 31 of Chasing the Horizon, released on the 17th of September, 2018. I'm your host, Wes Fleming, and we're about to get philosophical with Matt Chambers, the CEO of Curtis Motorcycles. Leading off the news this episode is one of the most stunning things I've seen in motorcycle racing in a long time. We all know racing is dangerous no matter what the manner of conveyance is, but we also expect the participants to engage in an honorable fashion. Not so with Moto2 racer Romano Fenati. During the recent race in San Marino, Italy, Fenati reached his hand out and squeezed the front brake lever on Stefano Manzi's motorcycle. Experts estimate the riders were moving at about 140 miles an hour at the time. MotoGP officials black flagged Fenati, which means he was removed from the race. They cited irresponsible riding as the reason for the black flag. If you watched the whole race, it felt like Fenati was exacting revenge for earlier significant contact between the two riders, and contact that was absolutely attributed to Manzi, who received a 6th position start penalty for the next race. It must not have been enough of a punishment for Fenati, though. Manzi was able to regain control of his motorcycle after Fenati grabbed the brake lever, but later he crashed out of the race anyways. MotoGP officials suspended Fenati for 2 races because he, quote, deliberately tried to cause danger to another motorcyclist. His racing team, the Marinelli Snipers team, issued an apology and then fired Fenati, citing, quote, unsporting, dangerous, and damaging conduct on the rider's part. They quite justifiably commented that Fenati put Manzi's life at risk. For his part, Fenati issued an apology and owned up to the revenge aspect of his action. This is the second time Fenati has made headlines for his irresponsible behavior on the track, though. The first time was for a Moto3 race in 2015 when he kicked another rider during warm-ups. Manzi refused to accept Fenati's apology, commenting on the inexcusable nature of the offense. There are some in the racing world that immediately called on Italian officials to charge Fenati with a crime, something like assault, but I don't know how likely that is, even though the matter has been referred to the federal prosecutor's office in Italy. The Italian Motorcycle Federation responded to the incident by revoking Fenati's racing license, more or less making the MotoGP suspension moot. The day after Marinelli Snipers announced Fenati's termination, MV Agusta and the Forward Racing team announced Fenati would not be racing for them in 2019. Fenati's response to the fallout was to retire from motorcycle racing completely and publicly blame Manzi for the entire chain of events. It certainly didn't take him long to walk back his statements that he behaved, quote, disgracefully towards his fellow rider. No matter what, the MotoGP circuit is safer now with Fenati out of the picture. For some happier news, we look over to Ducati. They've made a giant splash in the retro bike scene with their Scrambler models, sales of which have now reached 25% of the Italian builders' numbers. For 2019, they're putting out another Scrambler, this time calling it the 800 Icon. The 800 Icon takes the basic cool factor of the Scrambler and adds daytime running lights, auto-canceling LED turn signals, and a bunch of ergonomic tweaks as well. This may well be one of, if not the, least expensive motorcycle on the market with cornering ABS. With the release of the 800 Icon, Ducati now carries Scramblers in 3 sizes, 400, 800, and 1100 cc's. We don't really get a lot of motorcycle news out of Finland, and little of what we do get from Finland involves electric motorcycles. Yet here I am today to tell you about a tech-forward electric motorcycle from Finland that looks like it came half out of one of the Tron movies. The company is called RMK Vehicle Corporation, and the motorcycle itself is called the E2. Now, at a certain level, electric motorcycles are becoming somewhat commonplace. I mean, the discussion portion of this episode right here features a man who is shifting his entire company's production over to electric motorcycles. But that's not why I'm telling you about RMK and the E2. The E2 features a hubless rear wheel. That's right, No hub on the rear wheel at all. That's why it looks like it came out of a Tron movie. RMK says the bike will be limited to 100 miles per hour, and one charge, if you get the larger of the two choices for the battery pack, can last up to 240 miles. Not only that, but the engine produces 236 foot-pounds of torque. The photo of the coil that makes up most of the rear wheel is astonishing. So check out the show notes for links so you can see this thing and visit the RMK website. Head over to the podcast website at chasingthehorizon.us. Now, this is the second episode in a row with BMW Motorrad news. We'll see if that continues next time and becomes a trend. But this time, it's a burst of technological wizardry from the Motorrad Co., and it's something you have to see to believe. BMW built a riderless motorcycle. I'm going to pause a second and let that sink in. A riderless motorcycle. They took an R1200 GS and put a bunch of tech on it that allows it to balance itself once it gets going. A tech has to get it rolling, and then it takes care of itself from there. The bike can recognize turns coming ahead of it, accelerate, slow down, obviously, and even come to a complete stop without falling over. BMW says the Robot GS is meant to gather consistent data, which is something a human rider can't provide, and that data could enable them to figure out how to control a motorcycle in an emergency situation that a rider can't handle. Now, I personally don't see the point of a future in which motorcycles ride themselves, but I can see why BMW is doing this. Improving rider safety should be at the top of every motorcycle company's agenda, and BMW has long been one of the tech leaders in the motorcycle industry. Last thing before we move on is a piece of late-breaking information about Indian's much-anticipated FTR 1200 due to come out sometime in 2019. The flat track inspired muscle bike is generating a good bit of hype, and the excitement was fueled recently by the leak of what appears to be a photo of a production version of the bike just sitting on a work stand. Speculation immediately ran rampant, but as all of you know, I've long said Indian is positioning themselves and the FTR to produce more than just standard American-style cruiser motorcycles. Well, it looks like my suspicions regarding that may be closer to true than anybody previously thought. Indian's patent application drawings for the FTR hit the internet a couple of days ago, and the drawings appear to show a modular design that could be adapted not only to other engine sizes, but to other styles of motorcycle as well. The patent application itself even mentions sport and standard style motorcycles. What's more, the patent drawings lend credence to the leaked photo because the important things are apparent in both: the trellis frame, the dual upswept exhaust, and the off-center rear shock. I'm absolutely sure we'll get our first glimpse at the real production bike in the near future at Intermot, EICMA, or the AIM Expo. All throughout the first season of the show, I started the MOA plug by mentioning one of my favorite aspects of membership as being the roadside assistance plan. It saved me on more than one occasion, including when I needed to get my sidecar rig towed 98 miles. That tow cost me nothing beyond my plan fee and the tip that I gave to the driver. Always tip your tow truck drivers, folks. Platinum Roadside Assistance and Tire Hazard Protection provides 100 miles of towing, flat tire service, battery service, and fluid service, plus 2 tire replacements per year for unexpected damage, including labor. You can put up to 3 motorcycles on your plan, and the cool thing about that is you don't have to specify which 3 motorcycles your plan covers. The service simply covers the first 3 motorcycles you need to use it for each year. If you're not a member of the MOA, you can still get in on the basic 24/7 roadside assistance plan for $69 a year. That covers the towing and services for flat tires, dead batteries, and being out of gas. You can step up your basic plan with an MOA membership for $99, which adds all the benefits of being in the MOA to your roadside assistance plan. To get up to the Platinum plan with the tire hazard protection requires $109 for 1 year, but that still includes a MOA membership. For more information, check out the website at bmwmoa.org/roadside. Curtis Motorcycles rocked the boutique motorcycle manufacturing world by announcing their future would be all electric. The company, formerly known as Confederate Motorcycles, built its reputation on high-end, custom-built, hardcore muscle bikes. So when they announced they would only be accepting orders for 36 more gas-powered bikes before making the move to electric, people started asking questions. I was one of them, and I was lucky enough to get a couple of hours of FaceTime with Matt Chambers at Curtis's headquarters in Birmingham, Alabama. What follows is part 1 of my discussion with Matt. Part 2 will be out next week in episode 32. Welcome to the show, Matt. It's nice to have you.
Thank you, Wes. Happy to converse with you about motorcycles. What's not to like?
Yeah, I mean, everybody, well, not everybody, but hopefully everybody listening to this show at least likes motorcycles in some way.
Yes.
But that love of motorcycles, some people it starts slow, some people it's instantaneous. The first time they see a bike, they know that's what they got to do with their life. How did you first get attracted to motorcycles?
Well, as I first started riding on the dirt, it was a time when you could go rent a little 2-stroke Yamaha and take it out in the woods. So my buddies and I used to do that during the summer. That would have been 51 or 2 years ago, and just fell in love with it. It really wasn't the look; it was just being on the two wheels, being with the two wheels. But I got to say, my big moment, and I guess every motorcyclist has a real hook, and it was 1967 at the State Fair in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, which was actually a place a little bit outside of town. And my buddy had a 160, and it was on the fairgrounds, and there were lots of cute little girls around, and he had that black Scrambler 160 Honda, and he let me ride it around, and I just felt so. It was just such a romantic feeling, I never felt. I don't know if I ever will feel like I felt that night on that bike with that cool air and the leather jacket and the, being like 13 years old and the cute little girls and just the whole confluence of all of this energy. And in a way, I feel like what I've been trying to do is just recapture that. I think as you age, as your maturation with the motorcycle continues on, to capture those moments on those smaller bikes, you have to have more and more and more to get the same amount. I mean, it's almost like the difference between the first time you drank a quart of beer and and later on, it's like it takes a couple of cases to get you anywhere near. That first quart is you never forget.
Well, that's interesting to hear you put it that way, because I just read an article or a blog post this morning about a guy discussing the difference between happiness and contentment, and how contentment is this state of being, but happiness is this goal that we're always chasing.
Right.
And it sounds a little bit like you're kind of chasing that feeling from being right on the edge of realizing you got your whole life ahead of you, and now motorcycles are part of it.
Yeah, I've always had this obsession with kind of identification with the motorcycles that are in my life at the time. It's hard to put into words, but both the aesthetic of the motorcycle and the feeling of the motorcycle are very, very important. And it's just kind of one of those things. It's the way it is. It's like It is what it is. I don't know exactly what makes it that way. I also love cars and clothes, so it's a little bit of a fashion accessory. But then on the other side, there's I do want the machines when I ride. I want them to be beasts. I want them to be ferocious. I don't want a weak machine.
Sure.
And of course, when you're a little kid, I guess what I was alluding to earlier, it like a little 80cc 2-stroke, when you're just a little 13, 14-year-old kid, it feels like a lot. The 160 felt really pretty
substantial.
Pretty much like that was about as far as I could go at the time, and I thought it was real special to be on that.
So as you kind of grew up a little bit, as you got a little bit older, now you're starting to get into your late teens, early 20s. You're buying motorcycles. you're keeping motorcycle.
Trophy Trail 500, man. That was my first bike. It's a great story. I went down to buy, like everybody, man. I went down to the Honda dealer, and I was sitting there, and I said, okay, go get the 450 CB 450. And I was in college.
Yeah, fantastic bikes.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, how can I go wrong? And she was getting it all together, and I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened, but I left. You know, Gian Gonzalez in Baton Rouge. He was a great guy, but I never bought a Honda new. And I ran over and I bought this old. This had been sitting on the showroom for like 18 months. It was a Trophy Trail. It was like the one that Steve McQueen had. It was aluminum and yellow. And I kept that for about a year and a half. I wish I still had that bike. That was an interesting motorcycle.
Yeah, I hear that from a lot of people. I wish I still had that bike.
Yeah, I bet.
But you're always looking down the road, and whether you're riding it or looking at the next one, you're always looking down the road, the next bike. And I mean, obviously, in mainstream traditional, built here, built there, built overseas, built in the U.S., whatever motorcycles, you're looking for something that you personally are not quite finding. Because that eventually led to the creation of Confederate, the original motorcycle company,
yep.
And then later on to the establishment of Curtis. So what do you think it was in motorcycles that you weren't finding that led you, 25 years ago-ish, to start Confederate?
Well, the Trophy Trail got me into my kind of British phase, right? So I had that, then I actually got that bike new, but then I traded it and ended up, went through a series of used bikes. The obligatory Bonneville, I had a Rocket 3, got a Norton. I got a new Norton. They were going out of business, Norton Villiers Triumph. So I got it in Pearland, Texas, low price. I think it was like $1,300 or something, so I could scramble that together. That was a really good deal. But it was a 75. It was the wrong one. It had the goofy exhaust, the left side shift. It wasn't, everyone knows the 74. So I had to go in and kind of set it, turn the clock back on it a little bit, recheck the carbs and all. That was a very good machine for me. And then I got a 500 4-valve Yamaha.
Okay.
Which was a blue bike. It was a very different. It was kind of like it was so much more sophisticated, and so that started to open my eyes to what was wrong with the British industry. Even though I loved them, and I had more or less been kind of on the anti CB750 Honda side of the equation. All my buddies were riding Hondas.
Yeah.
And then with my Norton, I raced a guy on a CB900. He came from New Orleans. He was like, "Dude, you're an idiot. Your bike is nothing." I'm like, "No, come on, man. I got my bike." And he beat me so bad. I mean, it was just a joke. I mean, he ran the quarter mile, came back, ran it again, and I was like halfway through. He lapped me in the quarter mile. It was so silly. It was really a joke. So I was going through this period of discovery. And then when I was in law school, I got my first Harley, which were really expensive then, and this was in '77, and I got a used, another $1,300 bike, so you can kind of see that was about where I lived, in that 1,300 range. Orange, 18,000 miles, straight pipes, Macomb, Mississippi. Blew out the charging system on the way from Macomb back to Baton Rouge, changed that out that night. But that bike really had a transcendent effect on me. The roller bearing bottom end of the Harley is very, very special, and I think, to me, that's what I would say it is, and it really gets inside of you. It did inside of me. So that motorcycle moved me away from the British bikes, made me feel that the Harley really had something way over what the Norton and the Triumphs and BSAs had, and at that time, the Sportsters would run, they would run a 13-second quarter mile. So that would, the Z900 was maybe a 12, but it would run with a CB750. So it wasn't, in the mid 70s, a Sportster wasn't, you didn't have to make excuses
right.
for its power. And And then I got out of law school and I started buying, I was buying 3-4 new bikes a year. And this got me through. I got the Katana, right? The first one, the 1000cc Katana. That was a big game changer, real goofy Simpson helmet inside of that thing. I thought I was some alien, master being or something. But that motorcycle didn't handle very well, but the design was very special. And it was really it was a beacon for the future of where things were going. And before that, I had a GPZ, and I had that one, and that just led to a whole series of really nice Japanese motorcycle products. FC750, maybe the best one. Had it set up real nice with soft rubber metals. That was when I was kind of at the high point of my ability to ride the GSXR, which was lightweight for the time. So the bikes were getting much better.
Right.
And I was discovering what it was like to be on a motorcycle that you could really go fast on and around corners and all these kinds of things. And I also, this was the period when I got the Beamer, did some touring. It was a different, I was keeping multiple bikes at the time and really enjoying my motorcycle hobby quite a lot. And then I got back to Harley by way of kind of transitioning to the idea of Confederate. My wife and I used to ride. She's a great person on the back of a motorcycle, and we would go on like the FC750, and then we would go on like the FX, Harley, and when the time was right, she would like punch me in the back, like, okay, do it, on the Harley. And she didn't understand that it didn't do anything. There was no, I'm like, no, you don't get it. When we're on the Harley, it just sounds cool, but it doesn't actually hit that mark that that you're looking for. So Confederate was kind of the idea was to be a little bit like you might think of an M version of a BMW, like the motorsports division of BMW cars. And the big dream was that we could get the performance of the Japanese or Italian motorcycles with the feeling and emotion of an American Harley Davidson type of feeling.
Right.
And I believe that we did accomplish that. I mean, we've got bikes that we've run 183, 184 miles an hour on the soft flats, which is about 200, and they're easy, mid-tens, maybe lower quarter-mile bikes. They're geared real tall. They make lots of power, and so that part of it we achieved with super rigid chassis. I mean, we never made them to be like those gassers. We were never set up to be like road race motorcycles, but they're very stable in corners. They have real good, solid, what I call like American road bike geometry. Mm-hmm. So they're stable. They feel very secure under all circumstances. So I think we hit the benchmark on all of those motorcycles. It's all set up that way. They have different feelings. We made like 9 different varieties, but they all had that common bond of being very robustly built, very rigid chassis, lots of suspension travel, great suspension technology, very light wheels, very light unsprung weight, fantastic brakes, great road bike geometry.
Yeah.
Lots of torque, the most torque relative to weight of any motorcycle.
And that matters, especially, when you're low speed, low gears, you're trying to get going, because that's when you really feel it. That's like you were saying with the Harley gets inside your soul. Yeah. I feel like that it's that low end torque that really makes you pay attention.
Well, I've thought about that a lot, and I believe it. I believe it's there's a pulsation that the Triumph Bonneville would vibrate, the Sportster would pulsate. This was my first Harley, mm-hmm. and there's a at some level the listener might think, that sounds like the same thing, but it's not the same thing. One is kind of in tune with it's rhythmic with your essence and being, and the other one is kind of an irritant. It's kind of bothered, as a musician, as a rock and roll person. Certain sounds are beautiful and other sounds are grating.
Yeah.
And the pulsation of what I experienced on my first Harley really did change me and made me want or yearn for the two. The other thing is that for my client, I want what I call a 5/10 experience. So what I would want for you if you were to ride a Curtis, the big dual motor, 290 foot-pounds, I want you to be out there doing about 5/10 of what the capability of the motorcycle is doing, and I want that to be kind of the sweet spot.
Gotcha.
So it's like, this is what I really enjoy this bike at about 5/10. Because I did have a turning point for me was on a ZX-10 that I had. I realized looking back, it was very clear that I was going down. I mean, I was going down, and I did go down, and it was a very bad accident. And I could have, I mean, I'm lucky. I'm very lucky to be here talking to you now. And I'm not blaming, it's all my fault, 100% my fault. On the other hand, this series of Japanese products that I was riding at the time, they really were, I mean, they really were kind of kiss the sky to really, and if you don't kiss the sky, then you don't get the fun. You see what I mean? In other words, you gotta really take a risk and kind of stick your neck out a bit to get to the sweet spot of what these motorcycles are about. And at 5/10, they're just droning on and really kind of chattering back to you like, what's the matter, man? You that weak? I mean, you're not gonna take me up into that flight zone. It's almost like you're in the airplane, but you never actually take flight. You just keep going down the runway without actually lifting off. I mean, in the motorcycle, well, are you gonna go fast enough to get up in the air, or are you just gonna stay on the ground?
Well, and that makes a lot of sense to me as a motorcycle rider. If I gotta operate a bike at 9/10 to get the enjoyment out of it, there's not much. My skill might not be matched to 9/10 of the performance of the motorcycle. My skill might only be in that 5/10 range.
Well, that certainly the chances are that your skill will not be. And I'm not a gifted rider. I very much am enamored with these racers. Some of my great friends are racers. I very much admire them. Mm-hmm. That is not, I have certain type of courage like we all have. Everyone has courage, and courage comes in types, so that's not a type I have. But I got into that rhythm where I wanted to see how far I could go, and I did. I had this little thing that I was doing, and I kept doing it, and it was just something that was going to happen. I mean, I was going to do it until the forces of nature said, no, now you get to go to the emergency room in an ambulance, and that'll be the next stop. And that was just coming, and it was a real shame. But the good part of it is that it taught me something about what I don't want for my client or my client's son or my client's grandchild. So I want to be really, and I have been very guarded about making the Confederate riding experience, the Curtis Warhawk, the last gasser we're making, and the electrics are all geared toward that 5/10, where you're having a really good time and you're not putting yourself in harm's way, and the machine itself is not encouraging you to go beyond your innate two-wheel capabilities.
Skill level, yeah.
Right.
So it sounds to me like your crash really altered the way you looked at motorcycles.
Well,
looked at motorcycling.
Absolutely, it changed everything, and it definitely changed my ability to ride. So I've never been as good after that. But I did jump right back on. I had the obligatory separated shoulder, and I was all gimp. But I went and bought another GSXR, and I rode it around just to prove. I had to show I'm not going to quit. But I've never felt the same. I don't think a person can feel the same after an event like that. I don't believe. But
I absolutely agree.
I mean, maybe they think they feel the same, but I think if they really were honest, there's always that little voice in the back. I mean, once that happens, once you go out to have fun and you're having a ball, the next thing you know, you're in the hospital for weeks and weeks and all that stuff. It's not like you go through that. And not to mention all the drugs they feed you and everything. I mean, I'm just not, I don't think I've ever been the same, and that was like 85 or something. So I just don't think I've ever recovered. I don't think a man can go through an experience like that and come out of it and be, I'm exactly the same. I think that's another kind of a misappropriation of fact that we might tell ourselves. But I don't want any of my clients to ever go through that. So
Right.
I'm very much involved at this point in my life with Curtis, wondering how I can create an experience for clients where the risk parameters are very much within boundaries that if we could quantify them, my client would say, well, I can live with that. Something like maybe skiing or riding a bicycle on a country lane or something like that.
Yeah.
And so I'm very much caught up with wanting to make sure. I mean, I want something that if my granddaughter came to me in 15 years and she was living in Manhattan and said, I'm getting a Curtis Hades to be my little companion around town, I would be like, good, I'm glad, that'll be good.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be scared because the way we've got everything set up, the way that the bike is tuned and the way that it kind of channels into her behavior, the human response to the way the machine is going to communicate is all kind of coherent with safety and not showing off. But at the same time, when the circumstances are right, you can get an experience. In other words, I know I'm on something that is wicked powerful.
Right.
It has real depth in terms of its power, not its speed, not its ability to accelerate as much as its ability to put torque against a tall gear. Like you're a big guy, so I can imagine you with like 700 pounds and the bar is bending on a bench press. It's not about speed, it's about the bar is bending, and I'm like, is he gonna make it? Maybe I got it here. And it looks real interesting.
Yeah.
All that power. That's what I'm yearning for replicating in terms of the experience with right now with 290 foot-pounds of torque, very, very tall singular gear, and the excitement is going to be rolling into that with all that torque. You can hear this.
I can hear.
It actually sounds pretty cool too.
Yeah.
It's not. These bikes are not without some noise. They actually sound pretty cool.
Well, that's actually here in the background there gives me a real good excuse to start talking about Curtis and start talking about electric motorcycles, because when I first heard that you were changing the name of the company from Confederate to Curtis and phasing out gas and phasing in electric with the goal of being all electric, I thought, that guy's got to be crazy. Because in my mind, electric technology hasn't quite reached the level where you can bank on it 100% yet. But you guys are all in. You said you said this. We're not going to make gas bikes anymore. We're only going to make electric in the future. Yeah. How did you get to that place?
Well, we're sold out for about a year. So the good news is that we'll make some money making. We've got a bunch of back ordered Confederates, and we've got about 27 or 8 Curtis Warhawks to sell that are sold.
And the Warhawks are gas powered.
They're gas powered. And Glenn H. Curtis invented the V-twin, so I think it's very appropriate to honor him with what is most assuredly the most badass American V-twin ever made. And let me say this: I mean, one of the logical considerations, if we reverse role, is there's really nothing to do with the V-twin, the classic American V-twin. It's a dead shark if you were me. There's just nothing you can do. I mean, what we've got is already maybe a little too far afield from how far you would want to put it, with the camming and everything that was set up of it. It makes a lot of heat, lots of power. It takes it takes really big gulps. It's the pistons are like 1,200 cc's each. So it's a big, bumbling, aggressive, throbbing beast of a device that you have to have a lot of respect for. It's set up real nice. I mean, we're really good on the tuning, and it's a lot of fun, and you don't have to ride it much to get the feeling that you want to get. You could take it out for 15 minutes, and you're like, something. That changed my day. I was having a bad day. Now I'm having a good day. But there's no reason to keep going with that, because we've done everything that can be done. Now the first Zeus that we built is better than the Warhawk. I've ridden it. You know, I've had expert riders ride both. It's already better. It handles better, weight management's better, suspension's better, tuning's better. Although the tuning it's pretty much like the gasser, only it's electric.
Right.
And it has more power.
Sure.
And it's entirely refined, so you have no vibration at all. And so there's some adjustments you make, but it's already better. The only thing is the range isn't on a level with what the gasser is. But again, I'm wondering, we're going to find out, I'm wondering how much that matters, because I'm going to make the argument that it's good that it doesn't have a lot of range, that you want to stay close to wherever, you know, you have your little local area, you know it very well. You get up at 6 a.m. on Sunday morning to go for your little ride and come back. It's almost no risk. Again, getting back to the risk parameters.
Sure. The
acceptability of those boundaries. And that you don't need to take a machine this special and take it out any more than if you had a very specialized Aston Martin, one of the 77 they made, or a Zagato Aston Martin or whatever. Right. You wouldn't have to take it and drive it to New Orleans and back. And you wouldn't do that. It's too valuable. You would take it with your special other, your mate, to go to a nice evening together in that car. It would be about arrival, the way it feels. You know, after you've had your dinner and you get in it and you fire it up, and the way it sounds and the way it smells and the way it looks and the way you look coming out of the parking lot, and the way the valet looks at you when he hands you your key, and all these things. These are all things that maybe for certain people make the price worth it. On the Zeus or the models to come, I believe it is the torque, and I think it is the visual of the motorcycle. It's a very special looking device. When you see it on the street, it's very fascinating to see it. It's a sighting. It's almost like it's a UFO or something.
Yeah, it looks like it's straight out of a science fiction movie. Yeah. And that's the thing that struck me when I saw the very first photos is, you know, number one, it's identifiable as your work.
Yeah, I think so.
But it's also really forward-looking in the concept of motorcycle design, which from your, sorry to cut you off, but from your, I'm going to do it anyways, right?
Do it.
From your history in making motorcycles, especially with your front ends, have always been really amazing to look at, but also really technologically advanced. You know, from a suspension standpoint, from a control standpoint, from a stance standpoint. And I think you've carried that through with the Zeus. It's clear that it's yours, but it's also clear that you're moving forward.
Well, we've got the geometry worked out very well. So we have a lot of experience with the type of front end that Curtis is using, and we're very good at that, and it works very well. So thanks for the kind words, and it is very nice. But this is the situation. From the beginning, if you reverse the clock back and you go back to like the 1960s when Harley was running the Shovelhead, and you know the Shovelheads in 70s, the Shovelheads were a little bit problematic, and you know they weren't as reliable or whatever. But I knew the guys that ran the Harley dealer in Baton Rouge well. I was married, got divorced, but that lady's brother was running the Harley store, and he was a flat track racer. They were friends with the local outlaw guys that hung out at that Harley dealership. She was a Harley dealership from a much different world in the late 60s and early to mid 70s. I mean, it was really almost controlled by that kind of dark energy of the outlaw guys. It's not like the dentist and the CPA and the lawyer were all congregating down in the hog owners group at the Harley dealer. I mean, they'd scare you from even walking in almost. And, it was good for me because I knew the dude, right. And he was real cool. But then they came with the Blockhead, and the Blockhead was a more reliable motorcycle, and that helped them to get more sales as they kind of toned down the kind of darker energy of Harley and kind of ratcheted up like this is more of a product for every man, and they kind of changed their marketing and everything else. The hardcore guys that were Harley guys never liked then this is a contextual moment in time. They never liked the blockhead. And the thing is that isn't discussed often is the blockhead was an inch taller. So the shovel head was a shorter motor, and that Wraith on the wall, that's a Sportster motor. So it's a little bit shorter. We actually made the Wraith with a big twin, so it was taller. Okay. That height difference, that 1 inch, is what made everyone think they didn't like it. What they were responding to was proportion. Okay. What we were able to do with Curtis is go back to like 1910 when Mr. Curtis himself was making a product. The motors were much smaller, and it makes for a very, very much kind of what we're calling a golden age sense of aesthetic with the high technology imbued within it. It's the proportion that makes it so I would say just so striking and adorable to look at, so lovely to look at. And I've always wanted that. We actually got S&S to make some shorter motors for us. They were very nice. And we never really completed that project that we went on in about 2000, which was to run the shorter motor. But they did look better. We made 3 prototypes with short stroke, basically S&S Harley motors with a 3.6 inch stroke. Okay. It also eliminated the vibration. So the whole thing about stroke with Harleys is actually a mistake, but it makes them shake a lot. Well, it makes them a lot less happy, the motor.
Gotcha.
When you take the stroke out, they still make really good torque. They rev a little bit better, and they're just happier to run. I mean, they're not, if they're running 32, 3400, they're pretty happy because they don't have to move the piston as far, as opposed to the typical S&S stroke would be 4 and a quarter, 4 and a half. We dropped it to 3.6, which is much better.
So I actually want to go back and ask you a question about these Harleys you're talking about, because one of the things I try to do, especially with the show, is to ask people questions about things they say that I don't understand. Yep. Because I figure if I don't understand it, there's other people that don't understand it. I'm not a Harley guy. What's a shovel head, and what's the difference between a shovel head and a pan head? I know it has something to do with the engine, the head, right? Shovel head, pan head, block head. But what's the difference between a shovel head and a block head? Chasing the Horizon is brought to you in Season 2 by Dunlop Motorcycle Tires. Motorcyclists the world over recognize the name Dunlop, and for good reason. With extensive global resources and a commitment to racing disciplines worldwide, Dunlop draws on a vast body of knowledge to develop innovative motorcycle tire technology. Much of this technology quickly makes its way to motorcycle riders, whether they ride on the track, street, or a weekend off-road adventure. Dunlop maintains extensive development and manufacturing capabilities in the U.S., focused on developing groundbreaking new products. Dunlop has been building tires using domestic and foreign materials in Buffalo, New York since 1920, and to this day is the largest manufacturer building motorcycle tires in the USA. Point your web browser to dunlopmotorcycletires.com to learn more about Dunlop's promotions, find the right tires for your bike, and use a searchable index of hundreds of Dunlop motorcycle tire dealers across North America. Please take some time to engage with us on the internet. Chasing the Horizon is on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And of course, you can visit the website at chasingthehorizon.us for show notes and links for all the sponsors, news items, and guests. There's a mailing list with exclusive content and giveaways open only to subscribers. You can sign up for that at tinyletter.com/chasingthehorizon. Thank you for coming back for the 31st episode of Chasing the Horizon. Episode 32 will feature the rest of my discussion with Matt Chambers and will be out on September 24th. Thank you for listening. We'll see you out there somewhere on the road or off it. Ride safe.